20 seconds. 10 seconds.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, along with the champions of talk. Morning Talk champion Jonathan Small in Studio 1A. Good morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
Doing fine, Stan. It's a pleasure to be back here again, as I say every single week.
How was your weekend?
Relaxing. Relaxing. Got a chance to visit a good friend yesterday. Had a nice dinner and pretty much enjoyed the day. Getting that urge to get ready for NFL, but preseason is not quite the same. As the regular season. Can't quite get there yet. But it's getting close.
All right. Yeah. You and my wife.
Yes.
Ready for the season.
It's like no other season in professional sports. We break everything down and everything. So how was your weekend?
I had a good weekend. I was a busy weekend out campaigning, doing some light campaigning because of course we're not in the Democratic primary in the general election, November the 7th. But it was a very, very busy, very, very, very busy weekend.
And obviously you enjoy this whole campaign process.
Oh yeah.
Love the campaign.
The only thing I'd rather be doing would be making a movie. We used to shoot a movie every summer, but this is better than movie making because it's real life.
See, I kind of wish you would be dedicated in the movie. I'm glad you actually said that because that kind of will lead into partially of what I would like to talk about later on. But I'm kind of wish. Well, I don't know movies alone, but more television productions, networking. I wish you could take it to the next level, but you're just not ready to go that direction as I would like to push you to. But I mean, whatever you enjoy doing is something. It's like not for me.
The difference between a community basketball or a football game relative to the NFL. Everyone ain't cut out for that. And everyone doesn't want to do that either. I love doing this for the fun of it, Jonathan.
Right. Well, to each his own. I mean, it's not for me to really tell you, what you need. Because you got to be serious-minded and committed. It's a lot on your level that you have to be committed towards. So I can only make the suggestion. The next is up to you. I mean, politics is important too. Don't get me wrong. I think it's real important. But I don't know. I'm not 100% sold. I'm 100% sold on the importance of political, of the political city government process. But there's always issues. You have to rely on people to elect you.
Oh yes.
Or appoint you.
Oh yeah.
And that sometimes, when you are more in control of doing what you like to do with the network and other areas, you're not having to rely on people to vote for you.
Well, that's true. I mean, I'm in control of what happens here, but then no one else other than me is.
Exactly.
I mean, everyone else is dependent on me. And so, I mean, it's just the other way around. You're more dependent upon other people. But this is the greater good in being able to help people in the other arena.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's important. Obviously, helping people is real important. Having a voice. And you can do both. You can do voice through social media, what you're doing, and you can have a voice through city government and the political structure.
Right. And since I like giving people a voice, this is one avenue, but the greater voice is the voice of the people and the fact that they need to be heard. However, we can talk about that stuff later on. Every Monday, of course, is we have special guests join us every Monday. They join us from around the country, around the world, and from time to time from right here in the city. But today, Jonathan has another wonderful guest. I always say take notes because they're always pretty good expert type folk at what they do. And so, I call these like little mini master classes. So, Mr. Small, you have the floor, sir.
Well, good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. We have actually a returning guest who we had the privilege of having on last year, I believe. And he brings a lot to the table towards media, entertainment, business. He has a background on air talent and also behind the scenes talent. The guest this morning on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show is the CEO and managing partner of Lloyd Media Group, LLC, based out of the Atlanta, Georgia area. No other than Miguel Lloyd. Good morning, Miguel. How are you doing?
Unmute yourself, sir.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, guys. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Good morning.
Doing fine, and you?
Good morning.
As a returning guest, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our main topic of discussion?
Sure. Yeah. My company is Lloyd Media Group, and so we handle marketing, communication needs from our clients, small to mid-sized businesses and enterprises is what we work with. I also serve in a couple other capacities in Atlanta. I'm a vice president of marketing communications for the Atlanta Black Chambers. In those two capacities, I host podcasts for both entities. Life Full Circle Radio is my lifestyle podcast that we host, and then Chamber Live is a program we host for the Atlanta Black Chambers. But I'm very, very, very well entrenched in the Atlanta market. Originally from Virginia. Norfolk State University grad, but hold the green and gold. But looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. Miguel, hip-hop has been around for 50 years, and a lot of talk of late is towards the celebration of the 50-year anniversary of hip-hop. But one estimate is coming out of all of this is indicating that Atlanta is now the hip-hop capital of the world. If that is accurate and that's the case, what has kind of made Atlanta now the hip-hop capital of the world, in your opinion and our expertise?
First thing I would say is just great music. Going back to the early 1990s with LaFace Records and them making a commitment to Outkast, and even before that, TLC, and they. I may be mixing up my two, who came first, but chicken or the egg. But TLC being a great R&B group that had Left Eye in there as the rapper of the group, But the Outkast were 100% hip hop. They were unique. It was a sound that most of us, like as I said, I mentioned, I'm from the Mid Atlantic, so I'm from Virginia. But their sound just captivated the market. But let's keep in mind that LaFace was started by L.A. Reid and Babyface, who obviously everyone knows who they are. Always going back to the deal. And so they were businessmen, and they saw the opportunity. There was great music down here in Atlanta. At that point, it was pretty much as East Coast, West Coast, New York, and LA were the two hubs of music, with a little bit of Miami with Luther Campbell. As we know, there was a situation there, where he took it all the way to the Supreme Court for freedom of speech. You had a few artists down out of Houston that were making a little noise, but primarily with LA and New York before the doors were kicked wide open with the Atlanta scene, and they haven't relinquished that stranglehold since.
And obviously, you mentioned the LaFace Records company moving or starting in Atlanta. But even before you get to LaFace Records, I mean, if you came along, and I know this is going way, way back, 1973, 1983, I don't think people would look at Atlanta then as so-called a hip-hop mecca. So, again, you give a lot of credit to LaFace Records. But would you also say that the SOS band with their R&B sound coming out of Atlanta should get some credit towards at least putting the city in an R&B level comparable to any other group, in your opinion?
Well, sure. SOS Band was amazing. That's not, the state of Georgia. You got James Brown that's from Augusta. This is not a place that's not known for music, right? And so as there was the evolution of music, which hip hop is a part of that evolution. But yeah, the SOS Band, this is a major city. Atlanta, as a civil rights icon, MLK and so many other icons, entrepreneurship with people like Herman Russell and some of those going back to Maynard Jackson during his tenure as the mayor of the city. Atlanta's been on the map for a very long time and been very important to Black culture. And so wherever there's Black culture, it's going to be all elements of Black culture. It's going to include food. It's going to include politics. It's going to include music. And so as the evolution happened, as you mentioned, the SOS Band, absolutely. We probably was a lot of sampling from the SOS Band as we got into this thing. But one thing about the South is a little bit known a little bit more early on as in using live instrumentation that early hip hop didn't have access to early on. I think New York really showed the initial push was, hey, these kids in New York didn't have access to the money and to the access. They started with turntables, but when we got down south, when you had someone like an LA and Babyface that were behind, stuff probably didn't clear their desk if it didn't have a certain type of sound or feel, instrumentation in their music. And then you saw that from the beginning with people like Outkast and their whole crew, Organized Noise, and the work that they did in the early 90s.
But also in the early days of hip hop in Atlanta, I don't think you kind of get the traditional style of, let's say, New York with graffiti, breakdancing. It was just kind of like pure hip hop, pure rapping sound. But did you get any other type of elements of the hip hop culture in Atlanta? Let's say going back maybe in the early 80s.
Well, let's for full disclosure, I wasn't in Atlanta in the early 80s, right? Okay. In the 90s I was in Virginia, but from sonically, I love music and I've been a huge fan of music for many years. Sonically, the South came out very different than New York. It wasn't so much of the break beats. It was more. It was a little bit more almost on a funkadelic level. Early on, with which some of your audience probably can relate to that, where sonically there was a lot more going on in the background than it was just a break beat like a Run DMC track that we all love. So they came in with a different sound, but they honored and respected where the culture was coming from because they were young kids in their early 20s and teens and 20s, and they knew the Run DMCs and the Houdinis and the major artists, because in the hip hop culture, we call hip hop culture the golden age of hip hop being between 88 and about 93, 94. And so there was a lot of amazing artists from Biggie Smalls to Big Daddy Kane to Rakim to, I'd be name dropping all day if we were to run them down. But they were primarily from New York and New Jersey. And so once they started to come down south, these Southern kids couldn't sound like they were from New York, as hard as they may try, right? So, there's some famous interactions at the Source Awards, and I think it was about 93, 94, where Outkast had won an award, and it was in New York, and some of the audiences were booing and this, that, and the third, and Andre 3000, who was one of the two members of Outkast, he basically said the South's got something to say, and if you're down here in Atlanta, it created a chip on the shoulder of these artists in Atlanta that they still wear to this day. And I really believe that was part of the reason why they just took a stranglehold. And the other part of it is that the difference between the way these guys were building their businesses in Atlanta as a comparison to New York is that a lot of these folks, because they weren't getting these record deals that some of the New York cats were getting, they were doing this stuff independently. So from a business standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, they had to do it. They had to hustle a little bit harder, not only in New York, but in New Orleans and in Miami and some of the cities down south. And so they were making a lot of money early, probably earlier than some of the New York artists were making better money.
Lloyd, should Atlanta get credit? Should Atlanta gets the credit for, let's say, creating Southern hip hop, or were there any other particular cities that you think should get the credit? I mean, who should actually get the credit? Like up here in the Northeast, people classify hip hop coming from the South Bronx. Would it be fair to say that Southern hip hop came from Atlanta, or did it come from some other particular place in the Southeast?
Well, Miami would have something to say about that. Luther Campbell and Two Live Crew were out in the late '80s, and they had a different sound that has influenced Miami. I mean, it influenced Atlanta as well early on, which is a different style of hip hop. The beats are much faster. There's a lot more dancing. A little bit raunchier, which is going back to see Dolores Tucker and some of the early civil rights icons and politicians who were fighting against it. If you don't remember, Two Live Crew and Luther Campbell went all the way to the Supreme Court to fight for freedom of speech when they were doing their music in the late '80s. So I would say the reason why Atlanta probably gets more credit is that Atlanta hip hop has been more relatively mainstream. Let's not forget Atlanta is really the center point, transportation-wise, commerce-wise, of the South. Everything comes through Atlanta. So and since the '96 Olympics, it's been a place everybody wants to live, relatively, right? So you have a lot of Atlanta music that are influenced, or even consumers like myself who are not native Atlantans, who have brought their style and their love of the culture, and it's kind of made a little bit of a blend of the culture. But rest assured, the T.I.s and the Jeezys and the Migos and some of those current artists, they're 100% ATL, and they're proud to wear that badge every day, all day.
Now, again, when Atlanta gets credit right now as being the #1 hip hop destination in the world, would that be, let's say, on talent, combination of other factors of, let's say, the majority of your studios, other events, awards? I mean, what kind of would you say makes Atlanta being classified as the #1 hip hop city in the world?
Well, in talent, sure. Everybody has their own brand of hip hop that they love. I'm a East Coast golden age of hip hop type of guy. If it doesn't give me that type of sensibility sonically, then I may or maybe not. But I'm 50 years old, so and we know music is something. When you're breaking music, is something that's more geared towards younger people. But you got to understand, Atlanta, so many people either live in Atlanta who may not be necessarily from Atlanta. And so then you also have, as we see in all of entertainment right now, there's such entrepreneurship, and the focus on entrepreneurship is something that the state of Georgia has become a great place for Black people to come down here and do really well. In comparison to a home that may be 5 bedrooms in Atlanta that, you'll find on every block. And the prices are starting to get a little bit more up there, but a 5-bedroom house in New York is not going to happen. unless you get out, I'm assuming out into the Long Island or further outside of the city. In Atlanta, in every community, in the Atlanta market, because keeping in mind that, people who are not familiar with the city of Atlanta is only about 600,000 people, but the metro is close to 6 million. Most people don't live in the city. So, you have so many areas in all these different counties to really live a certain lifestyle that you want to live, which means that people who may not have been here, their parents moved here in the 80s or 90s, and now they claim New York, but they may be from the Caribbean. Their family roots may be from the Caribbean, or their family roots may be from up north. And so now you're having a lot of talent that's being really concentrated in this area. But then, like I said, entrepreneurship is, there's a lot of market, there's a lot of the BETs of the world, revolts, and everybody has Aspire. There's so many different Black media companies that have their foothold in this market, and so it's pretty easy to get access to a lot of people you need to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you're taking a look at the hip hop sound, the hip hop talent, most people kind of like to identify with their geographical area. Like if you're in the West Coast, a lot of people can kind of accept people from the West Coast to East Coast. But when you have a rapper, let's say as a comparison, like Ice Cube, Ice Cube's sound and style was well accepted in the East Coast. He could merge and rap with East Coast rappers and kind of blend right in. And I think, to me, Jermaine Dupri might be one of the few Atlanta rappers born and raised that can kind of blend in with the New York sound. I mean, he has collaborated and did a rap sound with Jay-Z. He started off, let's say, as a dancer with Houdini. Correct. So he kind of has a uniqueness to him that, yes, he is a traditional Southern hip-hop rapper, producer, but he also has a sound that can kind of blend in up with the other parts of the country, particular New York. Is he kind of a unique artist at that level, or are there any other artists in Atlanta that can kind of blend in with a different type of sound?
Well, let's and I'm glad you brought up Jermaine Dupri, because Jermaine Dupri, I gave a lot of credit to LaFace, but So Def is celebrating 30 years as well. They've got a huge music festival. So Def is Jermaine Dupri's label. Jermaine Dupri is relatively the king of Atlanta hip hop. Where LaFace has, and I don't even know if LaFace Records is still around. I don't think it is. I think they all got absorbed into Arista. So Def is still around. Jermaine Dupri, as you mentioned early on, was his people. Michael Malden, who was his father, is a longtime music promoter and executive. So he already had roots in the industry. They originally, I believe, are from up top. I think they're from New York. And so they moved down here to Atlanta in the late 80s, early 90s. So Jermaine, yes, he's from Atlanta. He claims Atlanta, but he's got roots, just like many of us, outside of this city. Jermaine Dupri is, like I said, he's the king of Atlanta when it comes down to Atlanta music. Everybody understands him. Everybody respects him. One of the organizations I serve with, the 100 Black Men of Atlanta, we just honored him with an award just with our honors gala a couple of months back. But he's got a huge event that he is pulling off, a whole 2 or 3 day festival that he'll have. I want to say it's either in August or September. But yeah, Jermaine Dupri is the real deal. And the whole deal, a lot of New York rappers now are influenced by the South, because the bottom line is what's going to sell. A lot of the current rappers, there's a young lady out there, her name is escaping right now. She's got red hair, but she's from either Brooklyn or she's from up top somewhere. And so you're now the Southern sound, the Southern delivery, the cadence is hip hop is coming out of the South now. When you start talking about New Orleans and the run that they have and continue to have, and now, a lot of the major artists now, because of the internet, they're coming from wherever they're coming from. So, you had this series of, which I never got into, this type of hip hop called drill music, which is primarily out of Chicago. You mentioned Ice Cube, and I wanted to touch on that. Ice Cube, when NWA first hit the scene in the late 80s, it was a shock to the system, because most of us from the East Coast, we didn't know anything about LA culture. And in LA culture and NWA and the music that they presented to us talked about the gang life, talked about the things that in the cadence and the delivery was everything. Ice Cube actually, when you had Dr. Dre and you had Eazy-E, who were two key members of NWA, Dr. Dre being the producer who is now, basically a billionaire off of his music and his product sales. Ice Cube wrote a lot of the lyrics for those two artists early on because that wasn't their primary responsibility in the group. But when Ice Cube left NWA in the early 90s, his producer was the Bomb Squad, which was the same producers who produced Public Enemy. So that was part of the reason why many of us who were Public Enemy fans immediately gravitated to Ice Cube, not only because he was super talented, but then sonically he sounded like Public Enemy, which many of us love PE growing up on the East Coast. So, and then he started to gravitate back to his sound on the West Coast, probably by the mid '90s, and he's kind of been there ever since. But yeah, Ice Cube, from the standpoint, the whole East Coast, West Coast, when you go back to, the tragic loss of Tupac Shakur and Notorious B.I.G. in the mid '90s, we started to see the coast, those regional, the vitriol and how rough it was with the coast kind of started to wane. Now there's still huge parts of the business which are about building beef. 50 Cent built his career off of just who he could beef with today. And that's still part of the game. But for the most part, the East Coast, West Coast stuff is and the different regional stuff is competitive, but it's not like it's what drives the culture. People just love what they love.
Exactly. Stan, let me kind of bring you into this conversation as a business person, and let's say this is as a business question. If you was to start, let's say, a media business, or you was going to give a referral for a media business, would you still look at Atlanta as a sure bet that, someone is looking to establish themselves a type of record business or record, because we're talking about music. What kind of would make you steer people to Atlanta, or would you not steer people to Atlanta? Maybe the competition is so uncompetitive. Could you kind of just elaborate on what you would recommend and refer?
I'm not that, I don't know. I have lots of friends in music, but I'm not, I don't have enough experience I would direct those people to one of my friends.
Okay.
But from what I hear, Atlanta is, it's hopping. That's, it's a place you want to be.
Well, I'm saying as an entertainment business though, not for any other particular business. So someone has an entertainment company that they would like to establish. Would that be a place that you just would recommend them to someone else?
I mean, in your hypothetical, I can't imagine anybody that's really seated in entertainment business coming to me asking me for advice where they should locate.
Okay.
If they did, I know people in the business, and I would refer them to those individuals because that's just not my area of expertise. Not in music.
Music, okay.
I wouldn't. From what I understand, I think like Sony is in. All of the big labels have a presence in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of its presence in the industry. But I don't know names. I don't know people. I know people who know people.
Right.
So
Well, that counts too.
Yeah, I'd rep. Yeah.
Well, you have any questions you want to ask Lloyd? Otherwise,
I'm listening and learning. It's fascinating hearing about the nuances of hip hop and how hip hop is where it is today as the number one music on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about hip hop, and forgive me for interrupting. One of the things about hip hop is that hip hop music is a culture. Is where the influence is as important as the music. And that's part of the reason why Atlanta is so valuable, because from an influencer standpoint, there's an ecosystem around the music. There's fashion, there is television, there are reality TV shows. A lot of these reality TV stars are shot at. There's a lot of money that's being generated in content development, because as we got all this SAG after stuff going on in LA, which obviously is very, very important, The reality TV stars are not falling under that umbrella, so they're still shooting content. And so that is also part of the culture. A lot of the current rappers have gotten their start by being an influencer on social media, or they're on a reality show and then they make music. It doesn't make the product very good, in my opinion, as far as musically, but from the standpoint of generating revenue and business, Atlanta is a great place to be. Atlanta right now is considered a black tech hub. There's a lot of black tech startups that are here. A name you guys are very familiar with, Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes III, which is his son, has a app called Fanbase that's based here in Atlanta. And he's very active in the community, in the black tech and hip hop community. So that's part of the reason why Atlanta is such a centerpiece for everything, because you can set up shop in Atlanta much easier than you can in a lot of other cities. Not only set up shop, but also make these connections from people all over the country and the world, because Atlanta is a center point for commerce and tech and transportation and things of that nature.
And then again, the numbers are high, and sometimes people look at the big companies like, you had mentioned Sony Music, but right now you have Lloyd Media Group. You have, like you mentioned, Isaac Hayes' son. You just have so many businesses, so many people that you can just go into thousands very easy. So sometimes people gravitate to the big names, like, the Tyler Perrys, the Sonys. LaFace was obviously huge, and that's important. But you just have a lot of overall businesses in entertainment and media and other factors in Atlanta that kind of just makes this area stands out. And when you're saying, or people are saying, it's the hip hop capital of the world, I don't think people should take that lightly. That's a real praise, I think. That's not just a high recognition, but it's also lucrative towards revenue as well.
Anybody that's still disregarding hip hop and its impact on the culture has made a 30-year mistake. I have a friend of mine who owns a business called Rap Plug, and they teach STEM through music. He's a producer. He produced people like Ludacris and Will Smith, Jazzy Jeff, and Fresh Prince, and others. We're about the same age. He's got a company called Rap Plug, and he has a partnership with Microsoft. Microsoft has a hub here in Atlanta. Google has a hub here in Atlanta. MailChimp, I can Intuit. So now you're seeing these relationships that are burgeoning. There's an event coming up. It might be the end of this week. I happen to be out of town, so I'll miss it, but called Invest Fest, which is being produced by an organization called Earn Your Leisure, which does a lot of content on social media. But they're going to have Robert Smith and Steve Harvey and P. Diddy and that's just the top line. They're going to have another 30 people that are going to sit around and have these conferences and have these conversations. And that is largely driven, as I mentioned, P. Diddy, and others that are driven by the hip hop community. And what you're starting to see, that, like I said, the Steve Harveys, the Robert Smiths, these other corporations that are saying, we want to be a part of that. 30 years ago, there's a hip hop and R&B festival coming up called One Music Fest. It'll be in October. It'll be headlined by Kendrick Lamar and Janet Jackson. Who would have thought 30 years ago Janet Jackson would be headlining what would be considered a hip hop event? But that's the music, hip hop, the culture of it is just driving how things are moving in the black community right now. And so if folks aren't paying attention to that and finding ways to attach themselves from a commerce standpoint, I suggest that you kind of think twice about strategy.
And obviously the people down in Atlanta, when you have these festivals and you have these shows and you have these events, it's drawing high numbers of people. It's not just like a small crowd of people, like some type of picnic atmosphere. It's a real huge event. And I think sometimes people may not realize that. This event will be at Piedmont Park, which is a major park in downtown Atlanta. And they'll have 3 separate stages. And it'll easily be 250,000 people that'll probably come through there over the course of a weekend. It'll be massive. Now, would you say in Atlanta, because sometimes people might get it confused, people think the television and film industry kind of set the stage. But I think if you really look at it, and technically with Jimmy Carter, when he was governor, he did establish the film operation in the state of Georgia, and you had movies that was being made in Georgia. But if you really look at what kind of put the entertainment sector on the map, particularly with this LaFace record label that was based out of Atlanta, would you say the music is really the creation of really putting Atlanta on an entertainment level as a first start?
Probably in Black culture, sure.
Black, okay.
You know, if you watch, and like I was one of those kind of nerdy kids as a kid, 8 years old, and I used to read the credits when I was 8. If you look at the credits of a lot of content that's being developed now, you'll see that Georgia peach at the end of a lot of content. And why that is that there's some amazing tax credits here in the state of Georgia. A lot of other states are trying to follow suit now because Georgia is a unique state in which you can kind of get you can get any type of setting you're looking for. You want a rural setting, there's plenty of farms out here. If you want a city setting, you come to Atlanta. You know, if there's, if you want snow, you can actually go North Georgia, and it's right time of the year, and even get some of that setting. So you can create almost any type of content here in the state of Georgia. But from a Black perspective, as far as our culture, LaFace, So Def, in the early '90s, we're definitely at the forefront of it. There's another girl, but those were kind of the mainstream. Atlanta has their own culture of different things that are very unique to Atlanta. I learned about the first independent label. It's a brother by the name of Big Oomph. I think it's Oomph Records. He is an Atlanta-based guy. He received the key to the city by the mayor at an event at the National Black Arts Festival a couple of months back. Atlanta has its own culture for sure. Those of us, and they'll let us know, they call themselves Grady babies. It's two hospitals, Grady, and there's one other hospital, and the native Atlantans will ask each other, which hospital were you born in? If you weren't born in one of them two hospitals, you're not true Atlanta. And we kind of joke about it. And I sit back and I'm a spectator in that conversation because I know, I don't try to front like I'm from Atlanta. I've been here, 9 years, but I've studied the culture, and because I study music, I love the culture. But it's So Def, it's LaFace, but then from there, you had Organized Noise, and then you had a whole slew of artists that came behind it because at that point the door had been kicked open with T.I. T.I.'s been out here for 20 years. Recently, there's an organization called Quality Control, and they put out the Migos and City Girls and some of the more popular artists of today. And these are multi-million-dollar operations right here out of Atlanta, and they don't feel like they got to go anywhere. Everybody's gonna come here. Some of the greatest. Every summer, everybody comes here now. I don't have to leave this city to see anything. Tonight, I'm excited because the Force Live tour, which is the tour being headed up by LL Cool J, he's going to be in Atlanta tonight. But in the summertime, you could blow your summer vacation money just on concerts in Atlanta because every weekend there is something going on, whether it be hip hop, R&B, reggae, jazz, you name it. There's always something going on here in Atlanta.
And see, that's another thing. I mean, right now we're obviously talking about hip hop, but if you still want to break it down towards music and the entertainment industry as a whole, you have to put Atlanta right up at the top in that category too. If it's going to be classified as the hip hop capital of the world, but if you're going to talk about just, let's say, the music capital of the world, and you want to include other sounds of music, R&B, soul, pop, you would have to put Atlanta right up in the top 5 if it's not number 1 in that category too. Would that
I would challenge any city to say that they are bigger than Atlanta in the U.S. right now, and they would have to prove it to me. Beyonce was just here last week. She did 3 days. Busta Rhymes. I lose count of all the shows, and not just that. Taylor Swift was here a month or two ago. The great thing about Atlanta, because I think, and I've kind of culturally started to understand this. Atlanta, there's only 2 domed venues in the entire Southeast. You got Atlanta and you have New Orleans, right? So you got millions and millions of people that are in Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee, in Florida and Mississippi and all these areas, and they really got, where we got, when I say we, from where I'm from in the Mid-Atlantic North, there's a ton of venues where you can do these type of events. The reason why you see national championship games, national football championship games. The reason why so many events happen in Atlanta because we got the Mercedes Stadium that is a domed venue that you can close the roof, which means that there's nothing that you can't do in that venue any time of the year. Right. And so that's from years and years. The Georgia Dome was before that. Georgia Dome was only around for 20 years. They blew that up and built the Mercedes Stadium 8 or 10 years ago. And so, yeah, you name it. You name an artist. Patti LaBelle and En Vogue was here just, 2 weeks ago. You name an artist, they're going to take some time. And there's some smaller venues, like there's a City Winery that may have Eric Roberson or Dwelle or Stephanie Mills or some of those artists in those venues. There's great comedy venues all over town. There's 3 or 4 amphitheaters that are around. There's a new one on the south side of the city, brand new amphitheater. There's 2 or 3. There's Chastain Park that is in a neighborhood that's owned by an HOA that is a very well-known venue in the area. So yeah, it's Atlanta. And many artists, once they get down here, they realize like, oh, wow, I'm living in whatever I'm living in New York, and I'm paying 3 times as much as I can get this 5-bedroom house, hit the airport and go wherever I want in the world. Okay, a lot of them have relocated down here. Jill Scott lived down here for a while. I know she still lives down here now. I'm on the south side of town, Chris Tucker and Shaq and Rick Ross and all these folks, because they can get acreage, they can get land, and they can really live great lives. And, the airport is right up the street. There's plenty of private airports. And so Atlanta has been like this for a while, and unfortunately, unfortunately is what it is. People from up top, you kind of learn about it, but it's been going on for over 30 years.
Exactly. Well, I think the 90s really stands out. I mean, I just think if you ask someone in the beginning stages of hip hop, would Atlanta be the number one hip? And I guess that's hypothetical because you're talking 50 years ago and it was just being introduced. So that's not really a good, fair equation to speculate 50 years from now. Why would New York, the birthplace of hip-hop, no longer be the hip-hop capital of the world? But I think another thing people say about Atlanta comparable to New York is you have somewhat of a friendly competition. I know it could be cutthroat. You got some issues with trap music and things on that level towards the negative side. But you don't get like the infighting. People say what kind of hurt at New York towards their stage of a hip hop present was they had a lot of internal issues. It wasn't so much an external factor. But would it be fair to say Atlanta, you just have that, you have a very saturated market. There's no doubt about that. But you still have a lot of room to still grow and add your talent base there. And people seem to help people. I mean, I don't know if that's the case in every sector, but it seems like to me, man, just even with this referral to you with the Atlanta Black Chamber of Commerce, y'all seem to work somewhat as a good team towards the whole big picture of making your city a real entertainment destination.
Well, I think you're right in that regard. With the chamber, that's what we do. We network and we build together. But it's an amalgamation of everything. It's commerce, it's entertainment, it's entrepreneurship, it's politics. The politicians down here in Atlanta, they have, it's all relative, but they have some pretty good influence, especially in the city. The mayor, the city of Atlanta has had consecutively a Black mayor as long as hip hop has been around. So there's always been Black leadership, and there's always the city of Atlanta continues to flourish. And so, I think then that's the business side, that's the culture side of it. New York, as I'm assuming you are a native New Yorker, I can hear it in your voice. You guys are unique, man, and no matter where you go, you're gonna be New York.
Yeah.
2 doors down from me, I got a retired New York firefighter, and he ain't been in New York in God knows how long, but he's still New York. And so I find that, I accept people however way they come. People in the South, as you know, New Yorkers, you guys, have a certain way of saying it's New York or nothing, right? It's Brooklyn, it's Harlem, it's whatever. You get outside of the city, and a lot of people use that as a chip on their shoulder, and it happened in the music industry, right? Now you're battling not just Atlanta, but you're battling the entire southern region of this country. Because all these people that we think from Atlanta, they ain't from Atlanta. They might be from Alabama. They might be from Mississippi. They might be from Florida. They come to Atlanta because that's where they get put on. So now it's not just that you're battling for the attention of the market. Now we get into what the industry promotes. That's a whole different conversation because there's a lot of talent that does not get the shine that it should get because it doesn't sound like the Southern hip hop, which is now du jour, is what everybody loves. And then you start to get into, we start getting into education levels and things of that nature. That's a different conversation based a little bit more on opinion. But I think there's been a dumbing down relatively of the industry for a while, where a lot of the better talent, from my perspective, because I like a little more intellectual hip hop, I like some nuances, I like wordplay, I like things that are a little bit more deep than just people just saying the same 6 words over and over again. Because now you have a situation with social media where, we would listen to a 4 or 5 minute song that would go through development. These current artists are really just singing hooks. And then when they sing these hooks, that's what gets them attention. I always say back when we had this run in the last 5 years or so with Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars' popularity was based on the fact that it was music that we weren't getting from anybody else. It was an old school funk R&B feel that the industry said that we're not promoting that. But here comes this kid from Hawaii that, has tremendous talent, singing, sounding just like The Time and sounding just like R&B groups of the 70s and 80s. And they all like, oh, this is amazing. Where'd this come from? Where this come from? This is the same sound that we was loving in the 70s and the 80s. And so because he's coming in and then coming behind it with the album, the group he and Anderson .Paak did. And if your audience is not familiar with Anderson .Paak, do yourself a favor. Anderson .Paak is an amazing artist. He's from LA, but he's an amazing percussionist and singer, and he's got a sound that's very, very unique. But from hip hop standpoint, it's the way that it's moved that some people love. You're starting to see some people. I think even the younger people are starting to get tired of the repetitiveness, and you're starting to see some other types of hip hop that is starting to break through. But that's the industry. That's a whole different conversation. We ain't got time for today. That they really fed us, all of this sugar in music for so long, and now we got other problems we're dealing with.
Well, let's correct something. I'm not from New York, Hartford born and raised. Stan is from the Philadelphia metro area, but you've been here a long time. But New York has such a brand, and when I came along in the hip-hop days of the early 80s, you definitely wanted to tell people that you're from New York because it just had that brand that, no other city really could duplicate. And I think Atlanta's kind of almost done the same thing. You could be, like you say, 100 miles from Atlanta, but you're going to tell people that you're from Atlanta because it has that brand name.
That's correct.
That really plays a role.
Correct.
Stan, again, do you have any questions? Anything you want to add to the conversation?
No, I'm taking it all in. It's good stuff.
Taking it all, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Philadelphia, which we know has got some of the dopest music.
Oh, yeah.
Jazzy Jeff will be here tonight at this show. He'll be spinning tonight. I'm a huge Jill Scott. The Roots will be here tonight as well. They'll be the house band for LL. So this show's gonna be amazing tonight. But even the hip hop of the '90s coming out of Philly, that was Philly and Chicago, and then of course Queens with Tribe Called Quest and those artists. Those are my everyday still.
Right. And you come from the Norfolk, Virginia area, and that part. Okay.
I'm from Hampton. Went to Norfolk State. Correct.
Norfolk State, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, when you get into hip hop, I mean, you have a business. Let's say Lloyd Media Group. What is more of the benefit of having your business in Atlanta comparable to another city or state outside of Atlanta? What kind of gives Atlanta what kind of gives your business, let's say, somewhat of an advantage of being in Atlanta comparable to another place in Georgia?
Well, obviously in the state of Georgia, you really have, you have Atlanta, you have Savannah. Other than that, most of the cities are much smaller. You're talking, under 200,000 to 300,000 people in those other markets. So that, you know, they're small. You know, you have the Augustas and the Columbuses and different smaller cities. Where I live in the state of Georgia, Atlanta is the Mecca. It's all roads lead to Atlanta. I think entrepreneurship is welcomed in this city, in this state. Black entrepreneurship is welcomed in this city and in this state. There's 159 counties in the state of Georgia, which means that which the county system is something I learned as I moved down here. You know, if you go from one city or one county to the next, there could be new opportunities that, you know, if you live in New York with whatever is 10, 11 million people, you know, you got one police department you can go to try to go earn a contract. Who knows the politics you got to go through to get that. There are 30 some odd counties in the Atlanta metro. If I can get a contract from Clayton County, maybe I can go to Henry County, or maybe I can go to Fulton County, or maybe I can go to Coweta County. There's a lot more opportunity in that regard, and it's different leadership, and there's more opportunities to do that. There's tax credits here that are well. The community, you know, don't get me wrong, it ain't easy. It's not easy. You know, I've done business and lived in D.C. and I've lived in Virginia and even spent some time in Arkansas, and that's a whole different conversation. I never want to go back there.
Yeah.
But no, Atlanta is a great place to plant a flag. There's a lot of opportunity. Atlanta's not landlocked like many. You know, New York, you got the ocean to your east, and Atlanta, all they do is just build some more houses and cut down some more trees and build more communities, and it's been like that for a good while. So, you know, Atlanta's worked for me and my family up to this point.
And I think another thing is that, you know, because I think LaFace Records is no longer in operations in Atlanta. Technically, there may be a satellite office or something on that level, but I think the city can withstand a loss of a business or a company like that. And even, let's just say this is a missed opportunity. I think I just heard that the deal that Tyler Perry was working on towards buying BET and VH1 is not going to happen. Right. But it's like you don't even miss that because you have him growing and developing at such a high level. And I guess that would have been a great addition, you know, to his company and to the city of Atlanta. But it's like you don't really miss that because you got so much other talent in businesses there.
You know, I talked about this in my podcast last night. You know, that BET deal, you know, everything is for sale eventually. We'll figure out, you know, it'll probably go back up for sale soon. But to your point, Tyler Perry's got a studio that he purchased from the state of Georgia that used to be an Army base. And he's shot movies, everything from Wakanda to Marvel movies have rented his space to shoot their movies. Tyler Perry's good. He ain't got to worry about, you know, that was going to be another acquisition that would have been another feather in his cap. And I'm pretty sure there's some money to be made there. But so much content is now going to streaming services. There's so many different ways to get this stuff done. Tyler went from doing his stuff independently for years, and then he had a deal with OWN. And after he left his deal with OWN, then he came over here to BET and BET Plus, where a lot of his content is now. He had a deal with Turner for a while, which is also based here. So you start talking about a Warner, used to be Turner, now it's a Warner, and they own HBO and Max and all of them. He had a deal with them before that merger. So there's so much more going on here in Atlanta besides, you know, what a lot of us as Black folks, we kind of focus on the music. It's the ancillary services that are around that I really try to encourage our community to look at. I ain't a rapper. Right. I'm not Jay-Z, but I can produce, me and my folks, we produce content, videos, and all different types of programming. I can do that all day. And so, but what happens on a lot of these sets, you'll go on these sets and you'll see the big hip hop artists is up there performing, and it's nothing but white folks that's doing all the services around it. They're the producers, they're the caterers, they're doing everything around it. I'm like, okay, is that because we can't do the work, or maybe we're not even pursuing those opportunities because we're not in front of the camera? We think there's nothing else to do. There's a whole industry of people who have been doing this work and built careers, and they've worked with artists that are no longer in the business, you know, but they're still in the business. So, we as Black folks got to also look at the other opportunity to connect themselves to the entertainment industry and make a great living.
Well, that's key what you just said, because everybody get this misconception that you have to be in front of the camera, that's where all of the business and the talent exists at. But you have to have a lot of people behind the camera doing a lot of other areas that people don't always pay attention to. So yes, it is the visibility that you see people in front of the camera on stage, you hear them, and that instantly will gratify you to that particular person. But really, there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes that sometimes people just don't realize is very valuable and growing, like you just mentioned, growing with a lot of opportunities. And again, Stan, I think to bring you back into this equation, this might be, unfortunately, where people have always said this Hartford, Springfield, New Haven area have this so-called talent or potential, but there's just not the platform many times to match the talent or the potential talent towards the opportunities. And it's not about pointing fingers, Stan, or blaming anybody for that particular situation. But we've had a successful music group, Jagged Edge, born and raised in Hartford. I mean, there might be some other personal reasons why they went to Atlanta.
I didn't know that Jagged Edge was from Hartford, Connecticut, because they're known for being down here by the So Deaf with Atlanta.
Yes, they've been down there for quite a while, actually. I think they left as teenagers.
Okay.
But, and again, I don't want to be this to be negative, Stan, but again, this Hartford, Springfield, New Haven potential that people always have talked about, is it still that platform of just having the studios, the businesses, the match, the people, what the so-called opportunities is still the missing piece of the puzzle, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, you have to go to where the opportunity for you to grow is. I mean, you can have great, fabulous minds in shipping, but if you live in, in the middle of Kentucky,
right?
There's no port.
No port.
I mean, you can design all the ships you want, but if you want to launch them and all that, you got to be where there's an ocean.
Right.
So, the venue to grow and to thrive is not here. The talent is here.
Yes.
So you have to go somewhere else.
But excuse me. See, that's what people were saying about Atlanta in the 70s and the 80s, that they had the talent, but when you get a LaFace record company, and I mean, there's a lot of factors that makes a company decide to go there.
Right. But as you have had other guests come on, Atlanta was in the right place at the right time after there was a lot of intentionality put into making Atlanta what it is, so that what we see now happens.
Yeah.
There's Maynard Ferguson. There's
a lot.
I don't mean Maynard Ferguson. There's the mayor Maynard Jackson.
Maynard Jackson.
I got my music brain on. There's Maynard Jackson. The bold steps that he took and the bench that he built of leadership that is so impactful that today you still have black leaders running the city.
Right.
Those things don't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And that's not happening here. And so, you could Atlanta is unique.
Unique. Yeah, I think that's the best word.
And the people that are there understand what they have and they groom it, grow it. That's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
You can fly out of Atlanta's airport, which is the largest airport in the world, and get to 90% of America within 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's very few cities. There's very few. Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, where you have that accessibility. Everybody doesn't want to live in Chicago because of the politics and the weather, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Dallas is also a burgeoning hub, not so much in music, but in a lot of pretty much everything else. As you mentioned, I think it ain't about a lack of talent in Hartford, Connecticut. It's about access. And as you mentioned, I'm not sure. Here's the thing: I didn't know that Jagged Edge was from Hartford because I associate them with So Deaf in Atlanta, and they've been down here for a long time. But I know people from Connecticut that live down here in Atlanta.
Yes.
And came down here, because they couldn't get it done. And that's no knock on Hartford. It's no knock on where I'm from. Where I'm from in Virginia, we had a pretty good run, a great run, not even pretty good. When you think about Pharrell Williams, Timbaland, and Missy Elliott are all from the area where I'm from. And there's some other ones that are great producers and great people in the industry at Hampton University. Some of the most important people in the radio business are graduates of Hampton. Some of the most important people in the record business are graduates of Norfolk State that are doing great things. But it's just proximity, and you can't get it done sometimes where you're from, and that's okay. That's okay. Atlanta's taking great advantage of that. They've seen people come into this market, and they've made this community very welcoming for the entertainment industry, and it's flourished over the last 30 years.
That's a great way to end this segment. But I do want to ask you. I do want to ask you this one question.
Mm-hmm.
Probably other than, let's say, Nashville for country western music with their studio operation, there's really no. Would it be fair to say there's really no close second? I know Miami has a huge music scene down there as well, so maybe it is a close second. But other than maybe, let's say, Miami or Nashville, people say Houston really, but I don't think Houston has the music scene like Atlanta has. You really don't have much of a competition, or is it more competition growing that people may not be aware of?
Well, to that point, I'm not as much in the industry per se as far, but I know there are a lot of studios here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of studios in people's houses.
Right.
That, we're the day and age where you don't have to necessarily have the foam on the walls, and, the microphones are dynamic now, and people are doing what they have to do. But ultimately, to your point, yes, Nashville is known as being that mecca for country music. Atlanta is known as a mecca for being R&B and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
But Miami is they got their thing in Florida. You got DJ Khaled, who's huge. Anytime he decides to put anything out, it's going to be very well received. But you have Sean Diddy Combs, who's he's so New York, he's so Harlem. Revolt TV is right here in Atlanta, Georgia, downtown. And the real estate that he got here in Atlanta, he can't get that in New York at that price.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the thing about Georgia and about Atlanta. When you start to look at what this same access would be in New York or LA, they can't beat it. It's too much real estate. It's too cheap in comparison to other major markets, and they can go live wherever they want to live. We're on Zoom right now, and you can have all the meetings you need to have. And the culture of our business communities that we used to have these type of conversations all day, every day. So that's business is still getting done. Mm-hmm. But the hubs happen to be in Atlanta for a lot of industries right now. When you start to see Microsoft building a whole big building, they didn't just come down here and just lease out some space. They built a building here in downtown Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Google put their name on a huge story building. And you look at the skyline of Atlanta, if you do a Google search and see what industries have major footprints in Atlanta, from fintech to IT, to the Googles, to the entertainment space, everybody's got a footprint in Atlanta, and there's a reason for that.
Must be something about Atlanta, because other than Mayor Shirley Franklin, I have to give you an A+ presentation on your grade today, and she's the only other person that I gave that A+ grade to. So it must be something about the city that I would give two people from Atlanta, or residing in Atlanta, in your case, an A+ grade. It was an excellent presentation, and you were right on the money in just about every particular category. And I really appreciate your ability to come on. And I have to give the Atlanta Black Chamber of Commerce, Melvin Coleman, a great referral for you being a special guest this morning.
I appreciate that, and you put me in category with Shirley Franklin. That's special rarefied air, former mayor of this city. So much respect. I appreciate you guys giving me the time, and I'm glad I was able to contribute something to your conversation.
Pleasure.
Long live hip hop! Happy 50th anniversary hip hop.
Okay, thank you. Our pleasure.
All right. God bless you, brother, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule this morning.
No problem. Thank you for having me. God bless.
Okay.
All right, Jonathan.
Yes. 50-year anniversary of hip hop. I wanted to do another hip hop show. and this just fell right into the category, you know, talking about which has been recognized as the #1 hip hop capital of the world. And everybody can't be #1, Stan. You got to have a number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So
no, there can only be one.
Right. You know,
Number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. #1 doesn't share its space with anything.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's just say AccessTV.org network is #1 in Hartford for social media. I mean, you got to sometimes select certain categories. And what you've been doing with this network, you know, for a long length of time, you know, unless there's other social media networks in Hartford that's really on this level that has the consistency, let's give your network being rated as #1 as well.
Well, I appreciate that, gentlemen.
Yes. But again, your mentality and you're driven right now with this campaign, though. So businesses and media, you want to keep it. I mean, because you have to obviously stay grounded and stay focused. You have a real important task ahead of you. So,
well, I love doing this, and I love doing this. So, it is what I love to do.
Yes.
If somebody comes by here with $1 million, we'll spin this sucker up. We'll spin it up and turn it into whatever, But I'm good, so I'm not looking to do that.
Right.
But if somebody has $1 million and want to come by here and sit down, and we'll put together a strategy and a plan, and we can make magic happen. But there's other ways to make magic happen besides this. So we explore those things as well.
Exactly.
All right. Morning Talk. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Jonathan Small, J. Stan McCauley. Morning Talk live. Stick and stay. We'll be right back.
Hey, Hartford, Connecticut. I'm talking to you. We got to get out and vote. Vote for Stan McCauley. It's our time. We got to rise up and take it back. Vote for Stan McCauley. Vote for Stan. You gotta vote for Stan McCauley. Vote for Stan. Vote for Stan. Oh yeah.
It's more than politics than just what your social covers. And it ain't somewhere written down in bold letters. Don't just take my word for it, do your research. Think of your future, look at your bigger picture. Shooting tie, clean up, unity for the righteous. Plotting on action, hands on access. With a light source vision, door to door knocking. Guerrilla style marketing, brainstorm as a collective. Real neighborhood suggestions. Only we know what it is where we living. To make real life decisions. Move on facts, make it manifest back.
You gotta vote for Stan McCauley. Vote for Stan. Vote for Stan. Vote for Stan. Oh yeah. Look at your city. Stop. Take a look around. Is opportunity flow into your house? Are you working? Wait, can you save some money? And is your neighborhood safe? Or is it a homicide every night?
My name is Marlon E. Styler Sr. Many of you may know me as the two-time welterweight champion of the world. I'm here to tell you that Democrat J. Stan McCauley, as our next mayor, will fight for you until the last bell. Help me throw a knockout punch. Go out and vote for Stan the Man.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I approve this message.
Hi,
My name's J. Stan McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, welcome back. J. Stan McCauley along with Jonathan Small in Studio 1A. All right, great interview. A lot to learn about the great city of Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was designed to be about hip hop, and we had Tyrone Fly Williams on earlier during the year, and he talked about the beginning stages of hip hop, starting in New York and how they played a role. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and obviously talk about what's being classified as the #1 city of hip hop. And we talked about other things with Miguel beyond just the hip hop music landscape. And I think when it was stated that, everything just can't be duplicated, you can strive for it. But I think businesses, we can do a little bit better. It's not even easy there neither. Most businesses, they claim new businesses fail within the first 5 years. So you got the potential to try and put the effort out. You're gonna run for mayor. Other people running for mayor. It's only gonna be one person elected. Businesses, I think, could be a little bit different, Stan, because businesses, you can merge sometime with partnership. You don't have to always go into business by yourself. There's ways of investing your money into a particular business. So that might be a little bit different than politics, but sometimes you just can't separate politics from economics. It's kind of...
I think that they're all interwoven. They're all interwoven.
Right.
It's not one or the other. It's all together. Yeah.
And again, as I mentioned last week, and employment opportunities. UPS is a Fortune 500 company, and I would say, and it's not for everybody. I mean, I got to be upfront with you. A package handler is usually going to be your way that you're going to get your foot in the door at UPS. It's hard to just jump into a Fortune 500 company like that and think you're just going to get a supervisor Larry position.
Not unless they're hiring supervisors.
Right. And then you got to bring a certain level of experience usually.
Absolutely.
It's not a typical entry level job.
But that's the case for any
right,
for any company, CVS, Aetna, laying 300 people
off. I heard about
here
that.
In Hartford.
Right.
Pink slips this week.
Something else to change the topic slightly. I thought about you. I had a conversation with someone that worked for Pratt & Whitney, and I didn't realize this person worked almost 50 years at Pratt & Whitney. My brother-in-law actually worked for Pratt & Whitney. He got the job right out of high school, and he was a machinist, and he just recently retired. And you worked for Pratt & Whitney at a period, but you didn't stay...
I only stayed there for eight and a half years, but I worked at Pratt. I came to Pratt not right out of high school, but right out of aviation maintenance school. I went to school for aviation maintenance, like Connecticut Aerotech. It wasn't Connecticut Aerotech. It was the Upper Bucks County School of Aviation Maintenance and Technology in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. But it was that same kind of school. I went right from there to Pratt & Whitney. I was 19 years old.
Well, it's funny because my brother-in-law was 19. I think he got on-the-job training, believe it or not, as a machinist.
At one time, Pratt would train you. because they needed the help. When companies need help, they will train you.
Right.
When they don't need help, they're not going to train you. You have to bring your own set of skills with you.
Yes. Well, the other person I know, he was a truck driver. He drove the tractor-trailer trucks, but he also did forklift. He told me too.
Forklift. Yeah.
So,
there's nothing that anything that happens. Someone at Pratt Whitney does it.
Yeah.
I tried to get into the motion picture television production unit that they had over there. I never could get in there. I was considered a malcontentious individual.
Well, that means Pratt & Whitney is still a huge operation. I didn't even realize. I think you mentioned that before about motion pictures and television, but I wasn't sure if that was still in place.
I don't know if it is now, but at the time they had a whole crew. They did production, video, film. Because Pratt & Whitney is a huge organization, huge company, and there's, they've got plants all over the place, and they're very, very busy. Communications department.
Right. Well, I hope this don't come across the wrong way, because it might be kind of tying you into the organization, but I wanted to say this anyway. I know the Greater Hartford African American Alliance, by you being the president, you are a voice towards a lot of different important issues, and you would have some influence as the president of the Greater Hartford African American Alliance. That organization, the late Dr. Kuba Asagai had issues with in the past. This lady that passed away, Michelle Brown, used to be the president. She was heavily emphasizing minority contracting participation. As the president, do you see one or a few big issues that you would like to push continuously going forward? I think the sewer and water issue is one big issue.
Well, we have been pushing sewer
that
and water.
Right. Well, let's just come out and say it. Let's say for businesses now, would you want to see more businesses, more black-owned businesses in the city of Hartford?
I'd love to see more black-owned businesses in the city of Hartford. My desire to see that, and the desire of some of the members within the organization to see that, does not make it so. It is different than, you have to have you have to have black entrepreneurs or business people who want to establish their business in Hartford.
Right.
There are a lot of people who don't want to come to Hartford. Successful white businesses don't want to come to Hartford because of the bureaucracy and the school system, things along that line. So,
sometimes what you want and what is practical is still two different things. You can want something and feel you can put the effort out there to make it happen, but like we mentioned earlier, if you're trying to get a record deal and you're in the Springfield, Hartford, New Haven geographical area, although you can do things now differently in the past towards music, because I think one time you was kind of promoting that we should establish more of a music presence, if I'm not mistaken. I thought that was
motion picture and content. More is what I'm pushing and was pushing.
Okay.
And still am to a certain degree, but not as vocal right now about it, but it's on top of mind. But you mentioned the group that was from here, Jagged Edge.
Yes.
They were trying to get a record deal, and they did. There are a lot of people from Hartford who are famous and very successful in the music industry. Ronnie Song is one of them.
Ronnie Song, right.
Just to name a few. There are people in Atlanta in New York, in Nashville, in LA, in Chicago, in Philadelphia who want to get a music deal and can't.
Right.
So it's not because you're from Hartford that you can't get a music deal. It's because you're not in the right place at the right time with the right set of talent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that are quite talented who want to produce records or make music, but they don't need, it's like trying to get in the NFL. In the music industry is looking for the best of the best of the best.
Right.
And so your desire to do it, while admirable, does not mean that you're going to succeed or that someone, has to, bend over backwards to make a way for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old saying that your talent will make, room for you.
Well, I haven't spoken to Jonathan Black. We had him on earlier during the year, and he's trying to spearhead the movement to bring television and film and digital media to the state of Connecticut.
I've spoken to him on that subject not too long ago.
And it's not, has anything changed since the last time he was on the program? Let's say for the better, for the worse, or about the same?
Well, it's things take time.
Mm-hmm.
Things take time, and your vision has to be aligned with other people's vision, and those people have to have the capacity to move your vision forward. Once again, there are a lot of talented people who want to do a lot of things, but there are also people who want to, who are in competition with you.
Exactly, yeah. Well, even here locally, I spoke to Reverend Henry Brown, who does the radio show on RTC, not the Reverend Henry Brown as the activist. And he was blowing some smoke or talking about he wants to establish a presence again at WRTC radio station. He wants to do a show. He wants to add on-air talent and other people. And this has been going on now, this conversation. It's getting a little bit more serious from what I was picking up talking to him a few months ago, but it just hasn't happened yet, So it's making me to believe, Stan, and I'm not abreast of what's going on at the Hartford Public Access station. I guess the best way is just to go down there or call someone and find out, is that station or that, station still producing daily talk shows. I doubt it, but I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know the status of the station, but the station doesn't produce stuff. People in the community produce stuff through the station.
Okay. So again, I don't know if that's happening.
Right. So the number of talk shows or sports shows or anything else that they produce is dependent upon a community or individuals that want to do the work. If folk don't want to do anything, then nothing will come out of it. That has less to do with the station and more to do with the individuals.
Well, with Reverend Brown with the radio show, he is definitely, I guess he wants to do the work. He's put some time in the past. I guess the COVID situation and some other things kind of changed their format. I know Marvin Mink is still on WQTQ. He's been real consistent. But you talk about a media presence and I gave you credit again for what you're doing with AccessTV.org network, and this is a commitment that you have to make. It might seem like it's just no big deal. You just pop up every Monday, you come on the air, and bing, bang, bang, everything is in order. But you have to make a commitment and a dedication to do what you do. I don't know how much it costs, but there's a price tag for production. It's not free. It's free on my part, but it's like my mother and other people told me there's really no such thing of a free lunch. Somebody has to pay for something.
Well, someone does. There's what's referred to as we used to use a formula at the station. It was cost. I can't remember what it was. It was a value of use. The value of use formula. And so what we did is we took our annual budget and we divided it by the number of hours that we were open.
Mm-hmm.
And that determined the cost of use per hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then we determined that, and I think we divided that by, so I should know this because I came up with the formula.
Right.
But then there was an offset because, of course, all of the time that we're open, we don't do production.
Mm-hmm.
But so there was a value assigned to the hours of use.
Mm-hmm.
So when producers would sign out equipment, they would get they would get on the paperwork how much it cost to use that equipment.
Right.
All right. There was a cost for the camera, a cost for the battery, a cost for the videotape, a cost for the SD card when we would have cards, a cost for the edit suite, a cost for staff if you used staff in any particular way. That way they understood what the value of the use was. Even though they weren't charged, there was a cost.
Mm-hmm.
And then during our quarterly meetings, everybody would have, if you put in a production request for a program that was a series, which was 11 programs in a series, then you had a budget. Your budget was X amount of dollars, which would be the 11-week cost of the production plus editing. And that was what we granted to you, a value of use grant.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you use equipment, it would be deducted. That way people understood how much what they were using cost. Because if it's free, it's worthless.
Yes.
It's worthless.
Mm-hmm.
It has no value because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a cost or a value assigned to every hour that the studio is in use. Now, of course, I'm using the studio, so I'm not gonna come out of pocket to use my own facility.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I don't charge any of the producers.
Right.
Okay. Because you all are here, there's content produced, and I love doing this, but there is a cost, so it's a give back and a mutual benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a cost.
Exactly. And I mean, whether it's advertisement or title sponsorship, however you want to break it down, and I have referred this network to one or two sources. One in particular, I'm not going to call it the name of the source. I think you might have an idea who I'm talking about. But whatever the case may be, and I don't want to say this again to sound like I'm whining, but and I know businesses, it's not easy for people to pay you for something. I mean, a job, obviously, the Department of Labor means if someone is going to be
now, what do you
employed.
mean it's not easy for people to pay?
Well, people can take things for granted. They want one time when this network was not. I left this network in 2017. You came back in 2020.
We scaled back our operation.
Right.
We came back on the air because of COVID and Black Lives Matter and all that stuff.
Right. But at that point, it was like a transitionary period, and I was trying to pitch some ideas to some people, and I was even telling some people, okay, just the test to see if they was going to be interested. This wasn't even an accurate figure. I said, okay, if you was to have a guest and the guest was to come on the show, it would cost $25. They said no, they can't pay $25, so, and you're going to come on for 30 minutes to an hour. And I understand, if you don't feel you need to pay for something, why, like you go to the library. I think you've told me this before. If the library started to charge people to come into the library, let's say $20 an hour, people would probably stop going to the library because you're used to having something for free.
Because it's free.
But when you put up front, and it's up to the person to decide if they want to pay for something. You tell someone it costs, for production costs, a certain amount of money. They got the right to say yes or no.
Right. There's a lot of people who do not produce anything in television. There are a lot of people in business. They don't have a television commercial. They don't have any. They don't take out ads in the newspaper. They use word of mouth. They wouldn't think of paying money for an ad because they just don't. They don't see any value in that.
Any value, right?
So these are business decisions that businesses make. And then you have other companies like McDonald's who heavily rely on advertising, even though word of mouth does very well for them.
Right.
So these are decisions business people make. Some business people are more savvy than others. There are companies that don't do any outreach. They have no communications staff, or don't want to pay for any of these things. These are decisions people in charge make.
Right. And sometimes you can't look at the little bit of it. You can say $25 is like a drop in the bucket, but again, if you don't feel you need to pay for something, if the library told me I got to pay $25 or $20 to come into the library for a couple of hours,
you may not go.
I may not go.
Yet there are people who don't necessarily use the library who will donate thousands of dollars to sustain and support the library because they believe in the value of what libraries do. And though they could go and sign out a book or use a space or rent a movie or something like that for free, they value the library.
Right.
And will come out of pocket. You can't necessarily say because somebody doesn't want to pay for it. There's a lot of reasons, and you also have to consider who you're talking about. Like, who's the user?
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people who use the library that would pay, and then there's plenty of people who won't. So,
but again, if you're accustomed to having something free,
then you're not gonna pay for it.
You're not gonna pay. Yeah, you start telling guests, well, it's airtime.
You don't. It's inappropriate to charge.
Inappropriate to charge. Yeah, you're right.
To be on the air.
To airtime, right? There's a better way, and there's another way to offset the cost of production than, like you say, charging guests and other sources.
Right. Most guests will not take you seriously if you charge them to come on your show.
And I would never decide. That was only that one time, obviously, because, again, I was not on the air. I guess this was early 2020 before you came back on the air. And there was some business decisions that I wanted to do a certain show. And truthfully, I didn't want to come out of my personal pocket. So now I'm trying to talk to the guests to say, well, this is how much stand costs.
Right, so you want a show. You don't want to pay for the show. You want your guests to pay for the show that you want to do. That's like you're that's public access league.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's all well and good, but that's not considered a professional type of arrangement.
Right.
And if you were going to put a grant in for the production of a TV program, and you said it was going to cost you $50, no one's going to give you the money because you can't produce television for $50. It has to be real world numbers with real world production and all of those things. Television is very, very expensive. And
again, my old motto, there's some things I will talk about on the air that I won't talk about off the air. Some things I'll talk about off the air that I won't talk about on the air. And there's some things I'll talk about both. And this might be one category. Let's say the North Hartford infrastructure project is a real important project.
North Hartford infrastructure project. You're talking about
MDC,
MDC?
Dealing with the water and the sewage issues.
All right.
And this is targeting particularly, let's say, the east section and the Granby Street section, Albany Avenue, some other areas too, but those are some of your main areas. And it needs to be whoever's collaborating with MDC or the state government. This is a big project. I mean, I don't know if people want to.
All infrastructure projects are big projects. There's the I-84 project that's getting ready to happen.
Right.
There are a lot of projects going on in the region, in the area, in the city And these are major, major projects.
Well, where me and you can kind of agree to disagree, and you believe, honestly, the number one goal is to provide the proper water deal with the raw sewage issues,
Right.
getting into the water and making sure that that is not going to continue to happen, and some other issues with the flooding. I'm saying, yes, that is the number one priority, but if there's some business opportunities for minority contracting participation, some other job opportunities for residents, why not have that as another important piece of the puzzle? It wasn't put into legislation.
You can't put it into legislation.
So you can't do that. Okay. So you never looked at the Clean Water Project in the past as an economic development project.
That's because it isn't one.
It isn't. No matter what Reverend Ritter was trying to state.
It doesn't matter who wants to state whatever. People are free to state whatever they want.
Okay.
There's people who state Stan should produce television for them for free. And can make a whole justice. I don't care what they think. It's my time. They don't determine what I do with my time and money.
But you didn't look at the Clean Water Project as a minority contract, as an economic development opportunity.
It is not an economic development opportunity. There are opportunities for there to be economic development, just like Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport. That doesn't mean that's what it is.
Right.
It is a program to put an airport and by extension a whole lot of other things. But the rest of it is politics.
But I believe the minority contractors would side different with you.
It doesn't matter what they side, Jonathan. That's their desire. There's an opportunity for them to make lots of money as minority contractors. Someone's gonna make money. May as well be them.
May as well be them. Yeah, exactly.
But that's not what the project wasn't. The project isn't on the table and on the drawing board for them to be rich. It's there to make to the degree that the water and waste treatment system that we have in this city should do two things: provide clean water and eliminate the sewage from people's houses and process it so that it can be disposed of in a way that's environmentally safe.
Right.
There is a failure in the system when sewage is backing up into people's houses. Now, when there's sewage backing up in your house, you don't want to hear about economics. You want to hear about, I don't want the sewage in my house. I don't want it in my restaurant.
Right.
I got to get this out. And someone said, well, we're trying to make some people rich while we do that. So you just hold on to the sewage until we make that happen. You don't care about that. It's supposed to take the sewage away from your house and process it. And it's supposed to bring you clean water. Now, can there be opportunities? Absolutely.
Right. Because
can minorities have access to that? Absolutely they can. Should they? Absolutely they should. Should we fight for it? Absolutely. But it is not an economic development project. Period. I'll have that discussion with anybody, anytime, anywhere. Their desire to turn it into that is not what makes it that.
Well, you look at economic development projects, obviously, if it's like a business that can turn a profit. Like if someone establishes a company or a business and they're making a profit, is that what you look at as economic development?
Economic development can be many things. If economic development is to happen, you have to have access to clean water. So by extension, having a clean water system where you can have water to drink, water in a house. You build all these houses, all these apartments, they need water. Where are we going to get the water? All right. How are we going to deliver the water? Is the water safe? As we build new factories, they need water. Do we have the water supply to contribute to that? New schools, they need water. We need to attach sewer to those new schools so that the sewage can get out of the school, and the wastewater can get out of the school and get back to the system downtown without overflowing and stressing out the system. These systems need to be designed. Mm-hmm. They're designed to operate and work the way they're supposed to work. They're not designed so that people can make money.
Yeah.
That's my point. Now, without those things, there can be no economic development. So you can nuance and word spin and all that kind of stuff to make this into an economic development project so as to justify or qualify a particular argument. But at its heart and base, it's designed to do something that's very, very simple.
So when Maynard Jackson mandated that there had to be a 30% or 25%, whatever the accurate number.
And he's going to make some black millionaires.
Right. Was he wrong to say the Hartsfield-Jackson
It wasn't a matter of right or wrong.
Not an economic development project?
That's not a matter of right or wrong. It was a political decision that he made, and he boldly stepped out and did it.
Right.
Period. There were a lot of people that were very upset about that. So who cares?
But then who could say who cares whatever you call it if it's not an economic development project or not? He implemented a strategy where minority contractors...
And there's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
He implemented it in spite of folk who did not want him to. And that's what I'm saying. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Talking about it does nothing. We need individuals in power, in place, who can implement it, not talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's not been implemented, has it?
Well, yeah, because the last minority contractors, there was no way to implement them getting a certain percentage of the contracts on the clean water.
Right, because those are political decisions. Mm-hmm. And if you are not in the seat of power or control the levers of power, all you could do is march and hold a sign. I have plenty of videotape of me marching, holding signs in front of the MDC. I lost a client.
Oh, you have?
Marching in front of the MDC.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yes, I did.
Okay.
All right. So I understand where you're coming from. But all of that doesn't make it an economic development project. That's all I'm saying.
And also you lost your job. However, they want to classify the reason why they fired you at the Hartford Public Access Station. Many people would believe it's because you decided to run for mayor in 2007.
It was.
Okay. So you've taken some bold steps towards fighting for something that you believe in. So I don't want to get
always
wrong. So it's not for me to try to convince you to buy into something that you don't really believe in, or you don't think it's a number one priority.
I didn't say it was a number one priority. Mm-hmm. I didn't say it was or wasn't a number one priority. I'm saying it's not an economic development project.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Now, if minority contractors have the means to get some contracts and they came to you or the Greater African American Alliance.
The alliance has nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that.
If I was the mayor,
right,
I would do everything in my power to make sure that there is compliance with projects that are done in the city of Hartford and that there is a minority component. Mm. There is local ordinances and legislation on the books here in the city of Hartford that currently are not being enforced, and that's why you see things happening the way these are the awards and that the victor gets. Mm-hmm. Elections have consequences,
right?
So if you want these kinds of things to happen, then you need to vote for somebody who's going to fight for them,
right?
Not somebody who's going to talk about it and then when they get in office do the opposite.
Right.
The people make this decision,
right?
But these are political decisions.
Well, again, I can understand, and I'm not a politician or I'm not an elected official, but I can kind of look into it. Wouldn't have been politically correct to say through legislations that 25 or 30% of the work on North Hartford or the North Hartford infrastructure project should be done by minority contractors.
That can be legislated.
That can be legislated. Okay, but
All it takes is the will of the legislature and the will of the people of the state of Connecticut to make that happen.
Right.
It has not happened as of yet. These are political decisions.
And nobody dropped the ball by not implementing that or not advocating.
It's not a matter of dropping the ball. It's a matter of political might, muscle, and power, Jonathan.
Okay.
Everything you want to do, there's someone that doesn't want you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yeah.
Somebody wants pizza. Another person wants West Indian food for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a political situation that needs to be resolved. So how are you going to compromise?
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is. There's always going to be opposition from someone to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's life.
Yeah.
So now you have to figure out, where can we compromise? In some places, the compromise doesn't happen. The argument is bitter, and people go to physical, blows. Countries are at war because they have a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
People kill one another over disagreements.
Yeah.
So these things shouldn't be taken lightly. For people to think that somehow because I want something, someone's going to roll over and give it to you, that's just fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It does not work that way.
Well, you know me, Stan, I'm just a person that likes to be told up front. I don't like to run around, and I don't like to be jerked around and play games with.
That's cool.
And I've had some experience with one entity towards this, a couple years ago. Well, if there's a good project out there and it makes logical sense, we would obviously look towards supporting you and the network that you are a part of.
Well, they're not telling you the truth, Joe.
They're not telling me the truth.
Yeah, right. Some people are less than truthful.
Right.
I mean, you have to be prepared for that.
Right.
You can't hang your hat on, well, someone said. All right. And, well, they didn't tell me the truth.
Yeah.
And move on.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't lament over something that somebody... Or maybe they changed their mind, didn't have the courage to tell you that it wasn't going to work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Could be any myriad of reasons.
Right.
We're only in charge of how we respond to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have access to the other person's brain.
Right.
We only have full access to our own brain.
But again, you believe the mayorship is a big, important piece of legislation that could steer and change a lot of the issues and problems that people are having in many different levels.
The mayor is an important individual who can help move agendas forward and manage the execution of those things that are put forward by our legislative branch, which would be our city council and state legislature, and bills that are passed and ordinances and things along that line. The mayor does have some broad discretion in certain areas. But, he is a champion of the city and to make sure that the city functions correctly. There are always going to be people who are for a thing and against a thing.
Right.
I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's putting bicycle lanes on the street or a bicycle stand or whether or not we should have another stadium. There's always going to be people that are for and always going to be people that are against.
All right.
So,
Well, let's just say at best, registered voters need to turn out and vote. I mean, that's just something that you can definitely be in control of doing. Unless something out of the ordinary happens to you, like I believe when we had the storm, and even in that storm in 2011, I still went out and voted. But some people
the big ice storm.
Yeah, the big ice storm. But some people said that had a lot to do, because even the day of that election in 2011, it was a nice sunny day. But people was telling me, well, people's minds weren't really on voting, and they just was consumed with the ice storm. And that kind of
folks were spending nights in shelters. I was one of them because it was cold and there was no electricity.
I do remember you coming on Channel 5.
Yeah. But that doesn't change anything. All these things are part of the dynamic. If you're running for office, then you have to live in the space of the moment and in Realville. Just because you want to win doesn't mean you're going to win.
Right.
Just because you run doesn't mean everybody else got to sit down and let you win. The reality is there are a lot of different things at play in a political contest. And there are a lot of people who want to win, and then there are a lot of people behind people who want them to win. Some for principle, some for ego, some for the billions of dollars that are on the table and how those monies are going to be spent. Some because they just love their community and want to see their community do better.
Right.
So the people that are all in this big mix, the ones who come out and vote for their candidate, if they have a majority, they will win. This is not rocket science. It's a mathematical equation. Whoever turns out to win, whoever turns out to vote the most will win.
Yeah. Am I being pessimistic if I'm saying I don't think it's going to be a high voter turnout in Hartford for the mayoral election?
I don't know whether that's pessimism or whether that is a fair assessment based upon what you're picking up on the street and what you're picking up through questions and talking to people. It's very difficult to say. All people can do is forecast. On election day, we will know. September the 12th, we'll have a better understanding of the minds of the voters in this region by whether or not they come out. Those voters, of course, will be all Democrats, but the majority political force in this area is Democrat.
Yes.
So if the Democrats come out and vote for whoever is going to be their party endorsed individual to run for mayor, and numbers, like overwhelming numbers, then you'll know that that's a good sign of the rest of the electorate, the unaffiliated, the working families, the Green Party, the Independent Party, and the Republican parties. These people, who knows what they'll do. But when we will be able to test this for sure come September the 12th.
Okay.
You'll also be able to test the strength of the people who are running by the number of people who came out and voted for him. So come September the 13th, we'll have some answers. By September the 14th, we will know emphatically, because enough time will have passed for us to look at the numbers.
Right. So gauge September the 12th towards the voting pattern of the people that's turning out to vote, and then who they vote for, who wins that particular primary.
Right.
And then now that's your strategy now to go in November to say, well, this is the candidate most likely that I got to target.
Well, we're going to be participating in the general election for mayor, because that's what we're running for mayor. We're not running to be the representative of the party. We're running to be mayor of the city of Hartford. And that's basically all I can say or will say. It's not a strategy. We have strategy, but that is, I don't want to give people the impression, as you are suggesting, that your strategy is. So,
but you'll be running as an independent in November?
Petitioning candidate.
Okay.
Right.
So
a petitioning candidate.
So will there be debates between September the 12th and November election between you, the Democratic mayor primary?
It depends on whether or not people have debates. My message is pretty clear. It's been out for a long time. It's on the website. People know who I am. I have a pretty good face recognition, pretty good name recognition. What I stand for, people know. I have access to where I've met venues to get my name out. So my presence at a debate or not will have little impact on whether or not people understand what I'm doing. I will be at some debates. I will not be at others. So most of the debates for the primary between now and election, if you're not on the ballot, you probably will not be invited to the debate. But it all depends on who's putting the debate on.
Right.
That doesn't mean I won't answer the questions asked at the debate.
But will you? Well, you're not going to be invited to any debates.
I have
up
been
until
not.
September.
I've been not. I've been. None of us that aren't on the ballot can come to the debate.
Can come to the debates.
Well, I shouldn't say we can't come to debate. We won't be on the debate. We won't be on the panel.
Panel, right?
Right. But we can answer. I'll more than likely answer. All of the questions that were asked, I will answer in social media.
Mm-hmm. And then once the primary is finalized, then it would be a good sense to try to get on other media networks going to the election. That's when you're going to see a lot of commercials.
You'll see lots of commercials. People will be on, Dennis's program if Dennis invites them.
Right.
But the majority of Dennis's audience is outside of Hartford.
Right. So you got Real Stories on Fox 61.
Right. And I mean, all of the networks' audience is outside of Hartford. It's not just Hartford.
Right.
It's the majority of the viewership for the networks is outside of Hartford.
Right. So you're concerned probably what?
I'm
Hartford?
concerned about Hartford voters.
Okay. You're not concerned with
I don't really care about what West Hartford voters think about in terms of they can't vote.
Right.
I appreciate that they like what we're doing, but they can't vote.
But it would be good for you to get on Real Stories, though.
Absolutely. As much press as anybody can get, it's always a good thing unless it's bad press.
Okay.
In a political contest. All right. But you want to reach the people who vote. And in Hartford, grassroots outreach and word of mouth and touching hands and shaking hands and meeting people in their space is much more effective than being on the 10 o'clock Sunday morning political program.
Mm-hmm. But also you want to get endorsed at some point by some other sources. You've been endorsed by a few sources now.
The biggest endorsement comes from the people on election day. The endorsement helps. Endorsing a political candidate is favorable to the candidate in that one, they got the endorsement. But unless those people are pumping money into the campaign, or more importantly, human capital, manpower, into the campaign, they're going to put some boots on the street, holding signs, manning people at the polls. It really doesn't
matter. Okay.
It's a head game. It helps the candidate feel good about themselves. But in the real world, it's like reinforcements. We endorse you to win the war, but we're not going to give you any reinforcements. Mm-hmm. So when you're in a fight, you need people. So are they going to go door knocking? Are they going to be out there on the street with you? Are they going to hand out, throwaways, palm cards? They're going to, casual stuff that you can get rid of. Are they going to do that? Are they going to advocate for you in your absence? They're going to be surrogates. All those kinds of things are very, very helpful. And a lot of times when you get an endorsement from somebody, that works. So if you get an endorsement from a union and the union members are out there helping you win, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So, of course, you want any and all endorsements you can get. Every candidate wants that. Unless it's from an entity that's not good.
Mm-hmm. And again, you can only do so much. I mean, you can't make people turn out and vote.
No, you can't.
You can just go out there, show that you're running for mayor. It's important to vote. But, and you can may work towards if somebody got transportation. I can't see how this could be a problem. But if people want to use that as a excuse, well, I don't have a ride to get to the polls.
They don't want to vote.
They don't want to vote.
It's like people coming to church.
Right.
Well, the church van will be by to pick you up. Well, baby, I know the church van came, but I didn't hear the horn blowing.
Right.
Well, you should have been looking out for it.
Looking out.
I was, but my hearing aids battery was dead.
Yeah.
They want to come to church. I didn't have anything to wear. I was going to come, but I had my suit was in the cleaners. I just couldn't get there in time to pick it up. People have excuses.
Excuses, right.
Excuses.
Right.
The new iPhone 50's coming out. Oh, where were you, man? I was in line at the mall. I had to wait for 50 hours to get this new phone.
Yeah.
So it depends on what people want. If they want to vote, they'll come.
All right. Well, let's wait for the primary and see how that goes as the first vote. I know that's not your concern because you're running for the general election, but still, you want to look at if Hartford registered Democrat voters.
Yeah, somebody's there's gonna be two losers.
Yeah,
coming out of that.
Coming out, only one winner.
One winner.
Okay.
One winner.
So whoever comes a close second, you don't go by that.
It doesn't matter.
If it's a close.
It doesn't matter. You lose.
You lose.
Right.
But if you lose, would that person be able to still run in November, or that's pretty much it?
It depends on who the loser is.
Oh, okay. I guess you're saying a lot, saying something.
Right. It depends on who the loser is. If certain people lose, they will run in November.
Right.
If other people lose, they will cease. Their campaign will end.
Right. All right. So
the winner will absolutely go on because the winner will be the nominee for the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. And would it be fair to say that's a big advantage that they have?
Huge advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be understated.
Okay.
In a Democratic city, a city run by Democrats, to be the endorsed candidate is tantamount to a victory.
Mm. So you got your work cut out.
So we have our work cut out. We have under no illusion. We are confident that we can win.
Mm-hmm. But a lot has to happen going in from now to November.
Well, we have to just do our work.
Well, particularly, again, I'm not a political strategist. I just think you need a high voter turnout. I think, again, I said this last week, the people that you kind of represent, the people that has these issues, whether it's disenfranchisement, whether it's they don't feel like they have a voice, they're being ignored, neglected, these are I don't know if these people are registered voters. That may be the problem. Maybe these people that I'm thinking
there's 20,000 active, registered, unaffiliated voters.
Unaffiliated voters.
Right. The people we represent aren't those who are all down and out with no voice and unregistered, living under the bridges of Hartford.
Right. Okay.
We advocate for them.
You advocate for them.
But our sphere is much broader than.
Yes.
Than those individuals who have a right to be treated and be seen. But we have a very broad base.
Well, in truth to all matter, you have to have registered voters. So people that are not registered voters really can't help you. I mean, they can help
vote.
Yeah, they can't vote.
Right.
And just, if they want to volunteer, pass out flyers, whatever, but you really need.
We need people who can vote. The people who have the most votes win.
Right. And that's why elected officials, politicians always look at the numbers.
Right.
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
So if you have a very, 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 very low voter turnout in September, that means that that's a rejection of the people who are running, and that the broader audience is waiting for November.
Well, you want to believe that, but they could also say they're not interested in November neither. So
they can't say that in September. You can make that assessment the day after the election in November.
Okay. That's when you can finalize it.
Right. You can't say that. Okay. Well, I can't say what's going to happen in September, but I can tell you what happened September the 13th.
Right.
And from there, we can begin to build some projections.
So if there's a low voter turnout in September, is that a discouraging assessment then? If that
not for me,
not for you, okay. All right. Well, that's good though. That don't discourage you because I would like for the.
There's only one person I am concerned about in this election, and that's me.
Yeah, okay.
I could care less about any other candidate.
Right.
This is not. Some of these people are friends. This is not a friend game. We are opponents.
No, but I mean the numbers of people that's voting. I think if there's a low turnout, and let's prove me wrong. Let's just say there's a high turnout. Mm-hmm. That would sound like that would be a good encouragement.
A high voter turnout with a big win for one of the three people running is a message. And that's a message that that the party has a lot of support, or that person has a lot of support, and they will be very difficult to beat.
And then that's when you got to target the unaffiliated voters. The Republicans are such a small number. I don't know if that even makes political sense, but let's just say the unaffiliated voters that you have to target. But let's just wait and see how the primary goes first. That's the first.
That's all
step.
we can do, John.
Yeah, that's all we can do.
Right? We don't know. We don't know.
Right.
And the polls are going to be less than helpful. Because the polls, and I actually had a polling person call me. It's always funny. The questions beg the answer. If you don't ask the right question, then you're not going to get the right answers. So a lot of times the questions are skewed to deliver an answer that the person asking that the person commissioning the poll wants to hear. So, you get skewed results, and therefore your data can be not helpful.
Right.
But we don't have anybody doing polls, so that's not a problem we have to worry about. So, but I only say that, remember the data for Donald Trump first time around. It wasn't until like 10 o'clock at night that they realized he was going to win. They had all kinds of rationale for why he can't win.
Right.
The data, but the polling wasn't correct.
Well, again, I mean, I'm not saying. See, people. I have to understand. People have to understand what is the role of a mayor, what is the role of city government in public safety, or running your board of education, or whoever you appoint or select. Other fiscal conditions of the city, the mill rate, quality of life, affordable housing. It's a lot of issues.
A lot of issues.
But usually for a person, whatever gravitates to you, you come up with something as a candidate that gravitates to me. You could almost say it's like you're telling me something that I want to hear, but then that's not always the best strategy, because if you can't deliver it, then it doesn't make you real. It doesn't hold you as a credible person. But
that is very, very true. But unfortunately, the vote's already been cast, and the uncredible person is in office.
Is in office, right, right.
Because they told you what you wanted to hear. Now, oh my God, they lied to me. It was less than truthful. Now all of a sudden, everybody wake up. It's too late. So you have to do your homework in advance of the voting day.
Well, I mean, it might be a little more to it than that. I mean, the mayor, Luke Bronin, had the machine. He had a strong campaign, advertisement. He convinced people that
spent $1 million.
Spent $1 million. That's quite a bit. He's on WFSB. Every time I look on the TV, I see him. He's talking about he's helped the city get out of bankruptcy. He's helped develop new housing. So people bought into that. Whether he really was responsible for that or not, people said, wow, Mayor Luke Bronin, this Hartford didn't go into bankruptcy under his watch. Maybe he did something correct. I mean, whether, again, it was his ability, people bought into that. And again, $1 million.
I don't know so much that people bought into it. I think that some of the things that were done are things that were not so bad. I mean, you can't take from the mayor the things that he did that were beneficial for the city. That would be disingenuous. It would be wrong.
Right.
That doesn't mean that one is in agreement with him. There's clearly a lot of people who appreciate and like the mayor. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been elected. There is an agenda, and there is a vision and a plan to implement the things that the mayor has done, and that plan is still in play and still in place, and there has been selected an individual to carry on that plan. So, anyone that wants to change that trajectory needs to vote for someone other than that person. There are things that many believe should be attention given to. Now, whether or not that'll happen remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll find out in this election. That's why you have elections. And then after the election day passes, there's a mandate. And those people everybody get behind the winner and let's move on.
Well, that's pretty much all you can do.
That's all you can do.
You know, at that point. All right. Well, again, I mean, we're going to be taking a break, I guess, the next couple of weeks. Labor Day is in 2 weeks.
All right. Yeah, we're off on Labor Day.
Some prior arrangements for next week.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, next week is the convocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hartford Public Schools convocation is next week. That'll be live during this time.
Oh, okay. So there's no show next week.
Yeah, no show next week.
Okay, so.
And then the week after is Labor Day.
Yeah. So unless I can get Quincy Jones for Labor Day.
If you get the cue to come in.
Yeah, you make an exception.
We'll make an exception.
Uh-huh.
He'll land his private helicopter over here in the parking lot. Make sure he has ample security. We'll block off the street. The mayor will give him a key to the city.
Yes.
There'll be a lot of fanfare. Unless we bring him in, undercover. And no one will know he was here.
Right.
We have him come in on Lifestar and have a hospital ambulance drive up here with the lights off, and he can get out and
yeah, we'll see. I mean, Quincy Jones is a big goal. I want to talk about the Michael Jackson Thriller album, and who better to have than the producer. But
if anyone can get Quincy Jones on this program, it would be you, John.
Exactly. But like I said, hopefully, things will go good for you over the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll look forward to being back, I guess, 9/11, believe it or not.
9/11, okay.
That'll be the next Monday.
All right.
Everything, so.
The Monday before the election.
Yeah, the primary election, Rob. The Monday before the election.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity for this morning's interview as well.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll head on out.
Okay.
Head on home. All right, my friends. We'll see you next time. You all have a great rest of your day. We'll let Jay Hogarth and the band take us out. You all have a blessed rest of your day. Bye-bye now.
Bye.